Preparing the live stream. Going to mute myself after I count you in. Preparing the live stream. 1, 2, 3, and we are live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our this month's Behavioral Health Live session, where we will be focused on stress. The title for this evening's topic is Live More, Stress Less: Effective Ways to Cope and Manage Stress. We are bringing this topic to you today because we know that stress is an everyday occurrence that all of us can relate to. And we think that this topic, of course, is always appropriate to discuss. We hope that you gain a lot of knowledge from this evening and learn of some new tips and effective ways to cope that will be fruitful for you moving forward. We're going to open up with an introduction of our panelists today. And so I first want to invite you, Chevalia, to introduce yourself to our audience.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chevalia Dorsey, currently a church member leadership with the Mount Pleasant Church and Ministry. And I am an ASIS family, child, and youth advocate for the state of Maryland.
Thank you very much, Chevalia. Next, Patsy, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm also a member of Mount Pleasant. My name is Patsy Cunningham. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I have been in the field for over 14 years, working with both children and adults, and typically individuals who have co-occurring disorders.
And Jackie, next, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good evening. I am Jackie Ladd. I'm a clinical licensed professional clinical mental health therapist. Look, I don't know why I'm getting tongue tonight. And I work primarily in residential treatment with adolescents.
Thank you very much. And I am Tanika Rice. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I work with veterans, and I have been in the field for more than 20 years. Now let's jump right into it. And let me ask the question to you, Patsy, if you could open us up by telling us exactly what stress is and how would you distinguish stress from anxiety?
Sure. So as you mentioned earlier, this topic is really important, especially for people right now, because stress is actually a normal part of life. So everyone at some point of their life have experienced stress, and is essentially a response to a change, to an external change or something that's happened externally. And it can be physical, stress can affect you physically, emotionally, as well as psychologically. And there's different types of stress. So there is a such thing as distress. So that is when your body or you are feeling overwhelmed and essentially like unable to cope, and is mainly perceived as more of a negative connotation of stress. It could encourage some positivity out of it. Like if you didn't study, for a test and your body is experiencing stress, it may motivate you to maybe do better next time. Eustress is more of a short-term positive aspect of stress. So maybe someone may be buying a house, and oftentimes when you're buying a house, it's very exciting, or you may be starting a new job, or you may be going on a date, for the first time in years. So those are some examples of eustress. Anxiety, which is a diagnosable, which typically individuals go to a clinician to be diagnosed with once it's more severe, is a little different. So anxiety, it can be similar to stress, but is more persistent, and oftentimes it's intrusive thoughts. And sometimes individuals are experiencing anxiety when there's nothing actually, maybe no external factors involved, more internally. So people may experience anxiety when it comes to large crowds. People may experience anxiety when it comes to different phobias and just different things like that. So although many times people use the words interchangeably. They are not the same, but stress can lead to oftentimes some anxiety. Like if you think about chronic stress impacts individuals at the community level. It impacts individuals like race-related stress, as well as, food deserts, typically are thought of as chronic stress or poverty, so financial things. And oftentimes when it's experienced, maybe when people are younger, as childhood, it impacts their frontal lobe. So it could lead to some anxiety issues later on down the line. So just, a little example of how sometimes we get it mixed up, but they are, a little bit different. So.
Wow, that was power packed. What I gained from what you were sharing with us is that, one, we all experience stress, and we can have positive stressors as well as negative stressors. But what we really want to be on the lookout for is when those negative stressors turn into chronic stressors, because they're sticking with us for longer periods of time, and that then may lead to us suffering from anxiety, which is prolonged and maybe persisting and much more disruptive to our lives.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Well, I am pleased to say to the audience that tonight we have something special in store for you. We have a few testimonials that we're going to share. And so right now would be great for us to start off with our first testimonial. Unfortunately, we cannot hear. We have no sound as of yet. Let's see if we can try again.
Still no?
Still no sound.
Okay, hold on.
All right,
I'm sorry.
no problem.
Let's try it
So
again.
here's a real life, real-time example of how unexpected scenarios can come about that can cause stress.
Exactly.
Stress.
External factors.
Absolutely. And here's what you all should know. Like, these external factors many times are outside of our control. And so what do we do? Now we all get flustered here and lose our wits about ourselves. But I think that this is a good example to show you, like, hey, in the moment, what can we do? We can sort of like hold things loosely with an open hand and say, okay, well, we were in this pandemic for a long time. And so now we're bringing things to you virtually. And we know that hiccups occur. These things happen, and it's just out of our control. And so one of the most effective strategies with dealing with these unexpected expectancies is to roll with it. Yes. What are your thoughts? Just asking the panel, what are your thoughts about like incurring like unanticipated stressful events in the moment?
I can go first. I can say this. I started to feel a little anxiety, right, when that happened, and I had thoughts and emotions, right? I was totally tuned out of what we're doing here. I kept thinking, what can we do? Like, there was almost like a slight panic happening. And that is very indicative of what happens typically when we encounter these things. No matter how small the problem, we still will respond to them the same way. I think when we talked about that word, when it becomes problematic, is how long do we hold on to it? How long do we sit here and go, try it again, try it again, try it again, right? And every now and again, just like life, we have to be able to tell ourselves when it's time to move on from that thing, right? And there are different scenarios, different situations where that's easier said than done. So I get that too. But in this situation, and when we have, I think we're ready to try it again, Tanika.
Yep, I was gonna let you finish your comment, but we'll come back to it.
We'll come back.
All right.
Let's see, a time when I was stressed. I remember I was in between jobs once, and this particular company, I'd already had the new job, but they had just lost a bunch of people in the HR department. And because they lost a bunch of people in the HR department, their onboarding process was taking crazy long. And so actually took a couple of months. So that HR department was slow onboarding me. And so I had been out of work, honestly, for almost 3 months. And, of course, starting to go through a lot of my savings at that time and, trying to take care of, my home and my family. And so, it was starting to get tight. And the tighter it got, the more stressed I was getting, because, I was starting to run out of my funds. And, but because, because I was running out of funds, it started to feel a sense of anxiousness, fear crept in, anxiety, worry, all those things begin to creep in. And when those things get to creeping in, they have a visceral, they have an effect on you physically. So then you start to, for some people, they don't eat when they feel those things. But for me, I tend to kind of want to snack more. And so that's one of those things that it had that effect on me. I found myself like just, kind of, anxious eating, if you will. And so, definitely had an impact and an effect on my body, physically, mentally. So stress is definitely not a good thing. So stay away from stress. God bless you.
All right. So what were your thoughts about the testimonial that was just shared?
I certainly could relate, spot on. I feel like, just when you, like we talked about earlier, feeling that stress and then can also lead to those anxious feelings, and that anxiety can be very worrisome. And, although he knew that he had got the job, just the onboarding process was taking long, and you don't know what happens within that time frame. And sometimes even for me, I may have even started to make up things in my mind, like, did they change their mind about giving me the job? What I'm going to do? I'm going to spend all my savings. So I certainly think it was spot on. And most of us that are on the panel, and even those watching, can probably certainly relate. So
I think for me, what stood out was, as he was talking, I thought about the process that he was explaining that he was going through. And Patsy hit the nail on the head. We start making things up. We start producing facts that are not facts. We start saying, well, maybe it's because of this. I think we said this on a previous session we had, where we talked about how we allow our minds to just take over. And we used an example once before around if you're used to reaching your child and you try to reach them to find out where they are and are they okay, right? And they normally pick up, but this one time they're not picking up. And it's getting late and you haven't heard from them. You will go from, okay, maybe they're just running late and their battery died, all the way to they're dead. Something happened, oh my gosh, And so we have to remember that it's okay for us to pause, realize what the anxiety and or stress is doing to us. And you've got to learn to talk to yourself. You've got to be willing to tell yourself, wait a minute, this is going too far. I'm doing too much, as they say, right? And I need to control my thought patterns right now. Right now, I need to tell myself to calm down, and I need to say, wait until I have facts, right? Again, easier said than done, because when you're in it, you lose it, right? But we gotta groom ourselves to be able to, at some point, say, you know, you're taking this too far. You know, that didn't happen. They didn't say that. In fact, they didn't even give you a response yet. How did you get from there to there? So if you take the time to think about what your thought patterns will do with those emotions that are triggering, you'll find yourself getting better and better at stopping yourself and saying, hey, wait a minute, this is causing me stress and or anxiety.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I noticed with Pastor Sharon's physical and emotional symptoms and how it was affecting him, which is actually a good segue to our next topic about how stress affects us physically, emotionally, and a couple of things to actually pay attention to physically would be when you're starting to have sleeping problems. You're waking up in the middle of the night versus or sleeping during the day, fatigue that you weren't experiencing before, muscle ache, tension headache. Not sure if you'll be able to notice, but higher blood pressure than you're normally used to. Stress can actually exacerbate other medical conditions that you may already have, such as diabetes, heart issues, indigestion. I know that's a big one, especially when it's relating to stress, heartburn. Emotionally, stress. I'm sure everyone can relate, not only just to the physical component, but emotionally. Crying spells, they come out of nowhere. So it seems, eating, sleeping problems again. Avoidance of friends and family, disconnecting, not talking, suppressing your feelings. A key point that is noted is that emotional stress, it makes you feel like you're alone, especially when you start to isolate yourself as if that's the way to go. And it's really not. That's one of the last things that you really want to do. Just recognizing those physical, emotional aspects, especially when they're out of your quote unquote norm.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm wondering from the other panelists if there are other effects of stress that stress has on the body that you would like to share. One thing that came to mind for me, like in an acute stress response, so when we just had what happened with the testimonial not playing initially, I noticed in the moment like that my stomach kind of knotted up in response to things not going the way we had planned. And also what I took notice of in the moment that I had to immediately grab a hold of and shift gears with was in my mind. I was screaming in my mind, we just tested this out. It was working just fine. We can hear everything. Like I was screaming that in my head. And then I said, wait a minute, this is a perfect opportunity to sort of dialogue about what stress does in the moment.
Yes. And even like, you know, your body start to feel warm. Like for me, like when I get stressed, like I start to get overheated and, you know, like maybe have like sweaty palms and like, you know, feel like icky. And I'm like, all right, you know, so I have to kind of like self-regulate because we know, you know, oftentimes when you're feeling that physical stress, it can make you a little bit too overwhelmed. And if it's persistent, you're constantly stressed out. Sometimes that can have, you know, a really, really negative impact on your body just in general. So I try to keep myself from being too flustered and being too anxious, or like say for instance somebody's about to, you know, somebody's driving and he's like, you know, somebody cut in front of you, like I will start to like overheat, like my heart will be racing and then I get really hot and I'm like, because you're nervous, you know. So those are some other physical symptoms that I also had experienced just now, like, okay, it did just work, right? Was I imagining things? So yeah.
A couple of other things that can happen as a relate as a result of stress on the body. Like for our hearts, we'll notice like a faster heartbeat. We can have palpitations, which of course does what? It rises our blood pressure. And of course, we don't, for those of us who have hypertension, we want to stay away from anything that is going to negatively stress our heart. There's also an increased risk of high cholesterol and heart attack when we are continuously subjected to large or a lot high stress. So we know that like our bodies really were not meant for stress. While we all experience stress, we weren't meant to be subjected to chronic stress. And so it can affect not just our heart, but our brain and our nerves. It can affect our stomach. People developing ulcers, stress-related ulcers is real, in addition to experiencing other GI distress or nausea, stomach ache. It can also have an effect on our intestines, and for us women, our reproductive organs. So a lot of negative things can occur as a result of chronic stress that we're continuously subjected to. I believe we have a written testimonial as well. Jackie, are you going to share that with us?
Sure. And so the written testimony says this: at one point in my life, I was oblivious to the signs of stress. It wasn't until I had significant stomach issues that I was hospitalized and the doctors could not find a medical cause. Then the doctor asked me to run down my daily routine, and that is when I realized that our daily schedules cause stress as well. And we may not associate it to stress because we're used to doing it. So the key is to pay attention to how your body is responding to your activities, physical and emotional, as mentioned above. This is a good way to reiterate knowing your triggers and being able to identify when you may be becoming stressed or already there. My main trigger is tense neck muscles and severe stomach issues. That's how I know something is off when I get those symptoms and they don't go away.
All right, thank you. And let's have our second video testimonial at this time.
Hello, I'm Candace. I'm here to talk about a time that I was stressed out or something that stresses me out and how it affected me mentally and emotionally. So I'm a hairstylist, and being a hairstylist, I get booked pretty quickly and I get overwhelmed with bookings. So my most stressful time is when there's a holiday or back to school season, which is coming up. And I try to accommodate all my clients in the need to get their hair done for back to school. And I get overwhelmed. So I also try to make sure I have time to get my own children ready for school, which affects me or stresses me mentally. Physically, I'm affected because I don't eat or drink like I should. Yeah, so I know that affects me physically, and I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, and my weight is probably changing. But that's what stresses me sometimes and how it affects me mentally and physically.
Okay, ladies. So I loved this young lady's testimonial, and this made me think of, let me just repeat one of the things that she said, two of the things. She said, I try to accommodate all my clients, and I try to get my own children ready for school. That when I listen to this testimonial, it makes me think about this newer concept and movement that's going on. Particularly, I've seen this within our female African American community of embracing the soft life and sort of dispelling that identity of what it means to be the strong Black woman. And so I was just wondering what you all may what your thoughts are about this and how this may fit. And just for a little bit of context for those of you who may not be aware or haven't heard of this terminology of the soft life, the soft living concept revolves around the idea of taking a break from the hustle culture, like always having to go, do, be there for everyone and everybody, working yourself from early morning to late at night. So it's resisting that hustle culture and rejecting everything that comes along with it, and rather prioritizing happiness. A Google search also indicated that it's about setting boundaries and prioritizing yourself and making decisions that leave you stress-free, in addition to it being about emotional honesty, like really getting honest with yourself about how you're doing, how you're handling all of these things that are coming at you, and being willing to focus on the preservation of oneself as it pertains to your overall health and well-being. So that's a little quick FYI on what it means to live the soft life or embrace the soft living.
I just wanted to chime in on that. I remember saying in our previous session that I'm no longer the strong woman. I'm not trying to be strong for anybody. And it's because sometimes that can get you in trouble. And so you will feel so overwhelmed. You're so strong that you have to prove how strong you are when you really cannot. And when those times happen, you really need to step down. You really need to take a break. You really need to say no. And you don't have good boundaries. Why? Because to some of us, we've been programmed to think that strength means doing it all, never saying no. I got it. Like, there are key words that we use that define what it means to be strong. And we're not strong, right? Because we're breaking down in some way, shape, or form, and it's going to play out eventually. However, the unfortunate thing is when it does, it's always really, it's like a horrific event, right? We really go through where we find ourselves having crying spells, right? We're going home, we're leaving the job and we're crying and going, I can't do this anymore, right? But we keep saying it to ourselves. We don't set boundaries and go back to the job and say, hey, I can't do this anymore, right? We need to make some adjustments. I think it's great to say we need to have boundaries and have all of these things, but what I want to use is a different term. I want to say it's okay to defend yourself. I want to say it's okay to defend your needs, right? And it doesn't matter who it is. And it doesn't matter what your position or your title. It doesn't matter who and how many people are depending on you. If you're not good, right, then what good are you for whatever you're called to do day to day? And I think you're being fake, and I think you're being phony when you can't be that for yourself, when you can't defend yourself, and you can't let the world know that this is too much for me. And we see it happen all over the place daily, even in church. And we don't know how to say it because we're afraid we're going to look a certain way to people. And at the end of the day, when you're lying flat on your back, those people are not there. They don't understand, right? And again, these are some of the things that unless you're willing to confront them, deal with them, right? And establish a new plan for your mental health and your well-being, right? You're never going to be right, but guess what you'll become? Angry. And you'll become angry because nobody understands me and nobody understands what I'm going through. And you have a duty and a job to tell them, period.
And I totally agree. I am currently living the soft life. I'm typically the type of person who I pride myself in, being able to just be strong and, get it done and help everybody. And I decided, I think it was probably after I was like in my second trimester that I'm not going to be everything for everybody anymore. I'm going to go ahead and stop that. I can give myself a break, exactly what Tanika and Jackie just said. I can give myself a break. I have the authority over my own body. me. I'm overwhelmed, and who's going to be able to be there for me if I'm just destitute, I'm just out and I just can't even get up. I'm not going to be able to be anything good for my daughter or for anybody else. And they won't even be able to help me because I'll be just, I feel like too distraught, right? So, I'm on maternity leave, and typically my spirit is check your emails just so you can be prepared by the time you go back. Nope, it's still gonna be there once I get there. Whatever I'm gonna have to read through, I'll read through it once I get back to work. Not doing it. So I'm currently, an example of I'm going to go ahead and choose me. I'm going to have some boundaries. I don't have to save the world. The world will still be there. And this is what I tell myself, especially when I get really overwhelmed and try to be everything for my friends, my children, my boyfriend, all of that. God was doing all this before you came here. He going to do all this when you're gone. Relax. Don't try to be everything for everybody. You're not God. Do what is within your control and take a break when a break needs to be taken. So currently taking my break and living my soft life. So
Good for you. Good for you.
Mhm.
I
So I
have
would like to, I'm sorry.
No, go
I want to put a spin on your ask, because I know you did ask for our opinion based on the African American women, but I would also like to put that spin on any of our male or men viewers, because the same thing does apply to them. Being the head of the household or being the head of their families, they also have a stress on them to be able to provide for the family, provide for themselves, do this, do that. And I also feel they should also know it's okay for them to ask for help, whatever the help may be. If they need counsel, someone to talk to, men, you also have the authority to set those boundaries, even on yourself, to say, this is too much. I do need some type of assistance. I need some guidance. I can't do it all on my own. And in my opinion, we're not created to do everything on our own. We're supposed to be relational people. We're supposed to be a part of some type of community where we're able to share, and give, and take. And so I also just wanted to just throw that out there, especially for our male viewers. Just know that you're not out there alone, that you also have the authority to set your own boundaries while still asking for whatever assistance that you need. So that way you don't fall into that stress life.
Yes, thank you so much. I concur with you. Absolutely. We don't want to leave our men out. It just so happened that these forums that I've been participating in have really been geared toward, African American women. But absolutely, I 100% agree with you, and I appreciate you sharing that. So I have a question for you all panelists. I wonder if you would be willing and open to give a personal example of sources of stress in your life. And for those of you who are watching, if you could also type your responses in the chat and share with us what some sources of stress for you are as well. And we would share those with the viewers at large.
So I'll go first on that. And this kind of ties into the fact that I didn't even know I was stressed. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, with alopecia areata, where circular bald spots, my hair was falling out. It was thinning, it started out with thinning, and to the point where there were just bald spots on the back of my head. And at first, the doctors attributed to me having COVID. But then as time went on, they noticed the circular pattern on my scalp. And when I went to a dermatologist, he said, oh, yes, this is alopecia. And so he basically said it's when the hair follicles are, there's inflammation, and it won't go away until that inflammation calms down. stress related. In my case, I'm not sure if that's all the case, but in my case, it was stress related. I had no idea that I was under that much stress because I felt like I'm the type of person, I know how to cope. If things come my way, oh, I have the disposition where I can just, okay, let's deal with it this way, let's deal with it that way. That was just, I thought that's how my persona was. And apparently, whatever the reason was, my body told my body, we need to release stress one way, and my hair just started falling out. And right now I'm in the phase where my hair is starting to grow back slowly, but it helped me to realize, okay, there are certain things in your life that that is stressing you, and you're going to have to figure that out. Because personally, I don't want to go bald. I know there are some that's what happened to them, but I need to figure out what the stresses are in my life that is causing this, so that way, whatever inflammation that's taking place physically, that can dissipate, so I can, for me, go back to being quote unquote normal. So personally, that's one of the ways stress has affected me here over the past year or so.
Wow, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your experience with us, the panelists, but the audience at large. One of the things that I picked up on what you were saying, Chevalia, is you said, I didn't know I was that stressed. And I emphasize the that, because it means what? That there was some degree of knowledge of knowing, hey, I'm dealing with some stress here, but I heard you say, hey, but I know how to cope with stress. And so, but it also sounds like what was going on was there was this deeper level of stress, maybe that chronic stress that was taking place of. And sometimes when I don't know if this was the story for you, but when we've been dealing with a particular issue or issues for so long, it can almost become our norm. So it's sort of like, well, I know how to deal with that. I know how to handle that. I'm managing. I'm still getting up. I'm still going to work. I'm still actively involved in my ministry. I'm still doing X, Y, and Z. And before we know it, if we aren't able to accurately assess, as you were saying, it can sort of get away from us and have these negative impacts on our overall health and well-being. I'm wondering what, Patsy and Jackie, what thoughts you have about how what sources of stress have come up for you in your life.
To be 100% honest, I feel like me needing to be in control of things is one of my major stressors, and that's control of like things as it relates to work, control in things that are related to like personal things. So, of course, we said stress is, typically or externally, and it's based on change. But a perfect example is I work for the federal government. And I'm a behavioral health advisor. And so typically when there's new policies that are coming forward, or there's a new administration and they have priorities on certain areas, they want different bills and things like that passed almost immediately. And so because I pride myself in being, like a overachiever and just I do my job, to perfection as best as I can. I want to make sure that I have all the information that's necessary. I want to make sure I can advise my leadership. I can give them, information on what some emergent themes are. And because it's, because I don't know what's going to come up and what's the administration priority is going to be, I'm often not able to just be always prepared. And so because I can't control other people's actions, sometimes that creates stress for me. But because I've recognized, like, like I said, living a soft life, you're not going to be able to please everyone. As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, and as long as you're staying, cognizant of, these are some things that, maybe CDC is doing, these are some things that maybe, Children's Hospital are really focused on, you will be as prepared as you can, because no one person can know everything. And also being able to depend on reliable sources, colleagues who are also maybe experts in the field, even this panel, when there's things that come up, sharing that information, you guys may have some of that information. So just allow myself to relax and understand that I'm not going to be able to control everything that comes down the pike, whether it's professional or personal. And as long as I'm putting my best foot forward, that's all that can be expected. So those were some of the major things that I've been stressed about over the past year or so.
Thank you. I see that one of our viewers shared that work is a tremendous stressor for them. Jackie, would you like to share as well?
Sure, I'm going to join Miss Patsy and our guests. I think work would probably be one of the greatest stressors that I deal with on a daily basis, but just by the very nature of my job and my responsibilities as a clinical supervisor and what I have to manage day to day. I literally have a team of folks who depend on me to help them make decisions around the care of someone. And so, you never know what you're getting. And so the stress of it all is when you have to make a decision and you don't have time to get, I guess you could say, the approval of others, or to even just collaborate with other folks who may be more experienced than you. I can see how that brings a great amount of stress, not just to myself, but other folks. And then the other side of that is just when you feel like you have the answer, but you don't have other people who understand, where your line of thinking is, or they're not in agreement. And so that can be, put you in a tough space, and it stresses you out just a bit, because it's like, oh my goodness, like, what if it doesn't work? Or, you deal with these different stressors and even anxiety. I have to break this news to them that this is what we're doing, and they're not going to like it. I already know this. So just the work stressors, I think. But again, it's I'm taking it back to when we talk about the impact that it has on you. I think we just have a duty to acknowledge it, and then to pause and say, why is this impacting me the way it is? And then kind of game plan and decide what it is you need to do to put yourself back in a space where you're not anxious and you're not going to bed and waking up with the thing. That's when it's really out of hand. And I can even say that as it pertains to my source. I remember the first time that I really went to bed and I woke up with the thing like right there, like as if I never went to sleep. And I thought, wait a minute, this is serious. Like, I literally slept 8+ hours. And I'm waking up as if I never passed out, you know what I mean? And it was so fresh for me. And that's when I knew that would be my priority for that day, to get that off of me, to figure out how to move myself past it inundating my thought processes and my emotions. So, yeah.
Thank you. Now let's talk about, I'm going to jump right into talking about some unhealthy versus healthy ways that people can deal with stress. And I'll start off with the unhealthy piece and just say unhealthy coping strategies really do tend to feel good in the moment. However, they also tend to have long-term negative consequences. So healthy coping strategies may not provide that instant gratification that many times we're looking for. However, on the flip side, they do lead to long-lasting positive outcomes. So of course, the goal here, we want to encourage people to really embrace and make the choice to go after those healthy coping strategies. So a few examples of unhealthy coping strategies are drug and alcohol use, but also overeating, procrastination, sleeping too much or too little. We've talked already about withdrawing from social activities, self-harm, aggression, like driving fast when you're, in your car, hitting or kicking someone or throwing things, yelling at your spouse or friends, children, smoking cigarettes, and misusing prescription medications. Those are all unhealthy examples of coping. While we have healthy examples, some examples, and these are not exhaustive lists, but some healthy examples include exercise, talking about your problems. That's what we encourage people to do, to seek professional help and to enlist the support of others around you, people who can provide sage counsel to you and provide a listening ear. Also, healthy eating, relaxation techniques such as deep breathing, meditation, and let's not forget prayer. And we also want to encourage you to engage in creative activities like journaling or painting or drawing, playing with pets, doing something that's going to make you laugh. And last but not least, I just want to say learning how to effectively problem solve, which includes like being able to identify the problem that needs to be addressed and brainstorming possible solutions with a trusted individual, identifying the pros and cons of each, and then picking the best possible solution that you feel is going to work best for you. So those are just some practical ways in which you can strategies for coping. Next, we're going to be moving on to inquiring about, the question is, can you avoid unnecessary stress and say no?
I think you can. I think
Okay.
we've been saying it all night, right? We've been saying how it can be challenging if you're not used to saying no. Do you know there are people who literally can tell you, I've rarely said no to someone? Very rarely. My children, my spouse, right? Because they're going to forgive me. They're going to love me afterwards, whether they like it or not. But when it comes to telling your boss, I really can't take on another project. Or maybe it's your spouse and you say, you know what? I need some help with the kids or the chores or the responsibilities or whatever. Or I just need more support and whatever from anybody, right? I think you can avoid it by learning to say no. You can avoid it by acknowledging what your boundaries are and making sure they're clear to those you have to interact with and those who you love, right? And that you live with and that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, including the boss, including the coworkers. And then just being honoring yourself by being willing to, just say what works for you and doesn't work for you. Because the minute you don't honor yourself, can I say this? The stress begins. The minute somebody says, hey, can you help me come and organize my closet? And you say, man, I mean, that's going to take time away from something else I really needed to do. Or better yet, the timing of that is just off. It's going to make me rush for something else I already obligated myself for. You can run through all of the real logistic and real reasons why you should say no, and you'll still say yes, right? And the minute you do, you are stressed. You beat yourself up. Why did I do that? So I say all of that to say, yes, I want to change the question. Can you honor yourself? Yes. And the lesson we've all had at our church is it's okay to say no and feel good about it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So what I took away from that really is the minute you don't honor yourself, the stress begins. So honor yourself. Honor yourself. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our third testimonial.
There was a time in my life when I had a very stressful moment. I've had a few, but one in particular is a few years ago when my mom was diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's, and coming to the realization that she wouldn't get better and she would get progressively worse in my eyes. And having to deal with that truth and see how it affected my dad and my family. It became stressful. However, the way I handled it was that I focused on my dad and my siblings more than my stress, which made me be able to deal with it and just know that the progression of the disease and what to look for, so I wouldn't be caught by surprise when something happens or something is said, like when she didn't know who I was or my name, recognize my dad or my siblings, and even my children. So that's one stressful situation that I dealt with. And I made it through because, as I said, I focused on other people and ensuring that they were doing better than me. And I just kind of compressed everything. Eventually it came out, but it came out in my time.
These testimonials were awesome, and they really added so much richness to tonight's discussion. What I gained from our last testimonial is the gentleman shared that he was focusing on others and sort of compress things, which makes me think of how we can repress our emotions, our thoughts, how we can stuff our feelings. And unfortunately, sort of like a pressure cooker, if we don't release some of that, then oftentimes we have these negative consequences as a result. So let's take a few moments to talk about some tips on how you can effectively cope with stress. So some strategies for relieving stress and living more freely. I'll start off with a few. So one, we want to make sure that we only take on one thing at a time to avoid overwhelming ourselves. And once you accomplish that task, choose, and I say that intentionally, choose the next task that you want to move on to. So that's one. Another, visualize and use your imagination and picture how you can manage a stressful situation more successfully. Oftentimes we have this negative self-talk. Like we don't need anyone else to say things to us because we're oftentimes, telling ourselves the worst possible outcome. So we want to counter that by focusing on or visualizing us being successful in this area. Here's one that I need to work on myself. Regularly engage in hobbies. And if you don't have one, then find one. So what I would suggest to those who don't have a hobby is try different things until you find something that you enjoy, and then schedule that time to indulge in what interests you. And lastly, go easy with criticism of yourself and others. You may expect too much from yourself and other people. Try not to feel frustrated, disappointed, or even trapped when another person does not measure up. Especially avoid criticisms about a person's character, such as "you're so stubborn," and try providing constructive suggestions for how someone might do something different. So those were a couple of tips for how you can live more freely and some strategies for coping with stress. Does anyone have any other recommendations?
I think a major thing is to, throughout all of this is to be honest with yourself and to be honest with others. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with, being able to be expressive. And like you said earlier, this whole series, behavioral health series, is to acknowledge that we need help and having a professional to be able to talk to. So if you're honest with your emotions, with yourself and others, it can reduce the amount of stress, because like we said, stress is natural. It can reduce the amount of stress that you may be experiencing.
All right. Thank you. And what's a scripture that you can provide to our listening or viewing audience about what the Bible says about how we should handle worry or stress?
So I like Philippians 4:6-7. Don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. And this is basically telling us to let God know what we need. And sometimes we'll find it to be very therapeutic if we can just take the time to even tell him. Even if we failed ourselves, and like we said this evening about we didn't set good boundaries, or we failed to do something, or we let our minds go too far, even just sitting down and making that a matter of prayer and asking God to help us with that will help us in a lot of situations and help to move us forward.
I have one, James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Count it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And that is the new international version. And I just love this part of the book of James, because it tells you, regardless of what it is that you're going to face, the first thing you should do is count it all joy.
Thank you. I will share Deuteronomy 31, verse 8, which says, "It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed." That speaks to my own personal prayer, because I oftentimes say, Lord, please go before me and make crooked paths straight, particularly when I am anticipating some challenging situations that are coming. So one other thing, as we come to a close, is 7:58. I want to allow an opportunity to give just a closing statement from all of our panelists. But I will leave you myself with the Serenity Prayer, which is something that I oftentimes quote, which says, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." That's another prayer that I keep on board with me at all times. Closing remarks from our panelists? Takeaways that you want to leave for the audience, give to the audience?
Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Stress is a normal part of life, but start to recognize when it's a little bit too much and seek help.
I would say you have the ultimate responsibility of taking care of you, no one else.
Thank you, Jackie.
Don't forget, you are not alone.
You're not alone. And with that, this concludes our behavioral health for July. Live more, stress less, effective ways to cope and manage stress. We want to invite you, if you have questions for our behavioral health team, you can reach us. You can email us at askbht, which stands for Behavioral Health Team, askbht@mountpleasant.org, and you're going to spell out Mount Pleasant. We will see you not next month, but back in September for our next Behavioral Health Live session. Thank you so very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you return in September. Good night, everyone.